He had always been a quiet man, the kind who moved through life like a shadow, observing, listening, noticing small details that others often missed. His skin was worn with age, each wrinkle a story of battles fought and lessons learned. He walked with a cane, not because he was weak, but because it was a companion that reminded him to move slowly, to see and understand the world in ways others rushed past. Every morning he would step out into the streets of his neighborhood, nodding politely at familiar faces, offering small smiles, small words, simple gestures that left impressions longer than anyone realized. That morning, the air was thick and humid, carrying the scent of the city mixed with the faint aroma of fresh bread from a nearby bakery. He moved along the cracked sidewalks, careful not to trip, his eyes scanning the streets not out of suspicion but out of awareness. Something about the rhythm of the day felt off, though he couldn't place it immediately. He paused at a corner, looking across the street where a small apartment building stood, windows lined with curtains in various states of neatness. It was then that he noticed her. She was young, her face delicate but marked with the weight of sleepless nights, worry, and fear. Her hair was tied back hastily, strands falling loosely around her face. She clutched a small bag tightly to her chest as if it contained every piece of her life that she could call her own. Her eyes darted around nervously, searching for something or someone, though he couldn't tell what. And then he saw him, a shadow looming over her, someone whose presence was heavy, threatening. The young mother flinched, her body shrinking, her hands tightening on the bag. Something in her posture spoke of fear that had been built over weeks, months, maybe even years. The elderly man felt a tightening in his chest. He had seen fear before, had seen lives crushed under the weight of it, and he could not turn away. He hesitated only for a moment, weighing the risks, understanding that his age, his strength, his quiet life did not make him invincible. But something deep inside pushed him forward. Compassion, a sense of justice, the instinct to protect someone who could not protect themselves. It surged through him, strong and unwavering. He crossed the street slowly, each step deliberate. As he approached, he could hear faint, sharp words, the kind that leave invisible bruises. The young mother's back was pressed against the wall of the building, her eyes wide and fearful. He could see the tension in her shoulders, the trembling of her hands. And then he spoke softly, without confrontation, just a simple acknowledgement of presence. "Are you okay?" he asked, his voice steady, calm, the kind that could reach across panic and fear. She turned quickly, startled, her eyes meeting his. For a moment she didn't answer. Uncertain if this stranger was friend or foe, he took another small step forward, careful to keep his hands visible to show he meant no harm. The shadow behind her shifted, noticing his presence, and for a split second he saw anger flare in its eyes, but the elderly man did not waver. "Hey," he said again, gently but firmly. "It's all right. You're not alone." The young mother's lips quivered, her eyes glistening with unshed tears. She wanted to speak, to explain, to cry out, but fear held her back. He could see it, feel it in the air between them, a tension so thick it pressed against his chest. He waited, giving her space while still keeping her in his view, his presence a silent promise of safety. The shadow behind her moved closer, but the elderly man's gaze did not falter. There was a steadiness in him that seemed to counter the threat, a quiet strength that did not need to be loud or aggressive. Minutes passed, though they felt like hours. Then finally she spoke, her voice barely above a whisper, trembling. "Please, don't let him." He nodded slowly. "I won't. You're safe now." The shadow shifted again, stepping forward aggressively, but the elderly man stood his ground, cane planted firmly on the ground. His eyes locked with the aggressor, calm but unyielding. There was no fear in them, only determination. The young mother watched, her own fear mixing with a flicker of hope, something she hadn't felt in a long time. "You need to leave," the elderly man said, his voice carrying authority without raising it. "Now." The man hesitated, sizing him up, clearly underestimating him because of his age and slow pace. But there was a presence, a weight to the elderly man that was impossible to ignore. The aggressor finally stepped back, grumbling, eyes filled with irritation and perhaps a tinge of respect. He moved away, leaving the young mother standing there, trembling but no longer under immediate threat. The elderly man reached out slowly, not touching her without consent. just offering his hand, a gesture of reassurance. She took it tentatively, her grip tight, desperate, needing the support he offered. "Come with me," he said softly. "Let's get you somewhere safe." She nodded, tears finally spilling down her cheeks, a mixture of relief, gratitude, and the overwhelming weight of what had just happened. They walked together slowly, the city moving around them, oblivious to the quiet act of bravery unfolding on its streets. He asked her nothing at first, letting her set the pace, giving her the space to process. Each step they took was a step away from fear, a step toward safety, toward a chance at a life that hadn't seemed possible for a long time. As they moved, he began to speak gently, sharing bits of wisdom, not in a lecture but as if guiding someone who had been lost. He spoke of courage, not the kind that roars, but the kind that persists quietly every day in small choices. He spoke of resilience, the ability to rise again even when life knocks you down repeatedly. She listened, clinging to his words like a lifeline, feeling a warmth she hadn't felt in years. They reached a small park nearby, a place he knew well, filled with old trees and benches worn smooth by time. He guided her to a bench, sitting down beside her. He kept a respectful distance, allowing her space, yet remaining a protective presence. She sat there trembling, hugging her bag, feeling the weight of everything she had endured, yet also feeling something new and a glimmer of hope. "Thank you," she whispered, her voice raw with emotion. He nodded, eyes softening. "You don't have to thank me. You did what you needed to do by staying strong. I'm just here to help you find your way." For a long time they sat in silence, the sounds of the city around them fading into the background. In that quiet, the young mother began to feel a shift inside her, a realization that she was not powerless, that there were people who could be trusted, that even in the darkest moments, kindness existed. And for the elderly man, there was a deep sense of fulfillment, a quiet joy in knowing that he had made a difference, however small it might seem to the world outside. The sun climbed higher, casting warm light on the park, and with it came the promise of a new day. It would not be easy. The challenges ahead were still there, looming large, but the first step had been taken. The young mother had been rescued from immediate danger, and she had found an unlikely ally in a man who had lived long enough to understand the true value of courage and compassion. As they sat together, a bond quietly forming between them, both knew that this encounter was the beginning of something transformative. Neither could see exactly how the path ahead would unfold, but both felt the unspoken truth. Life had changed, irrevocably, and perhaps for the better. They were no longer two strangers passing in the streets. They were connected by an act of bravery, trust, and the silent promise of support that could reshape their lives forever. The elderly man had led her a few blocks away from the apartment building, choosing a quiet street lined with old oak trees, whose branches stretched over the road, forming a protective canopy. The air was cooler here, shaded from the glaring sun, and for the first time that day, the young mother seemed to relax slightly. Her grip on the bag she carried loosened, though she still clutched it like a shield, hesitant to let go completely. They stopped near a small cafe that had just opened. Its windows were steamed from the morning bustle, the smell of coffee and baked goods wafting into the street. The elderly man gestured toward a bench outside the cafe. "Sit here for a moment," he said gently. "We'll take things one step at a time." She lowered herself onto the bench cautiously, still alert, scanning the surroundings. His eyes followed hers, noting the tension in her shoulders, the flicker of fear in her eyes. He knew she had been living in constant vigilance for too long. It wasn't just the threat she had escaped. It was a way of life, a pattern of fear and uncertainty that had shaped every decision she had made for months or years. "Do you want to tell me what happened?" he asked softly. He didn't push. He didn't demand. He simply offered the space for her story to emerge if she wanted to share it. Her voice was shaky, almost inaudible at first. He doesn't let me do anything. I can't leave the apartment without him knowing. He sells hits. I don't know what to do." Tears began to stream down her face despite her efforts to hold them back. I thought no one could help me." The elderly man reached into his coat pocket and pulled out a small handkerchief, offering it to her without a word. She took it gratefully, dabbing at her tears. He waited patiently as she composed herself. "You did the right thing by coming out," he said finally. "By stepping away. That's the first step toward reclaiming your life. She looked at him, confusion mixed with hope in her eyes. But what if he finds me? What if he comes after me? He leaned on his cane and shook his head slowly. We'll take precautions. I know people, places, ways to make sure you're safe. We'll go slowly. You don't have to do everything at once. The important thing is that you are free to make choices again. That's where change begins. For the next few hours, they sat on that bench talking quietly. The elderly man asked gentle questions, letting her set the pace. She told him about her life, the moments of fear that had kept her silent, the isolation that had made it feel impossible to ask for help, and he listened without judgment, without interruption, absorbing the weight of her experiences and validating the emotions she had carried alone for so long. He shared stories of his own past, not to overshadow hers, but to create a bridge of understanding. He spoke of times when he had faced challenges, when he had felt powerless, and how small acts of courage had helped him move forward. His words were not lectures. They were lifelines, reminders that survival often begins with small, deliberate choices. He explained that strength was not always loud or visible. Sometimes strength was quiet, persistent, and patient. By midday, he suggested they get something to eat. They walked to a small diner down the street, the young mother still holding tightly to his arm for support. Inside, the atmosphere was warm, the smell of sizzling food comforting. He ordered a simple breakfast, nothing fancy, just enough to nourish them both. They ate slowly in silence at first. Then gradually the conversation returned, lighter now, sprinkled with small smiles and laughter as the young mother began to feel a flicker of normalcy. After the meal, they stepped back into the street. The sun was higher now, casting long shadows on the pavement. The elderly man guided her toward a nearby community center, a place he trusted where she could find temporary support and safety. He knew the staff there personally, and he had already arranged for a quiet, private space for her. The young mother's eyes widened slightly as she realized someone else would know her situation and would help her without judgment. Relief washed over her, mingling with lingering fear. Once inside, the staff greeted them warmly, and the elderly man introduced the young mother gently, without revealing unnecessary details, respecting her privacy. She was led to a small, comfortable room where she could rest and collect herself. He stayed with her until she felt settled, making sure she had everything she needed, from food and water to contact numbers for support services. Outside the room, he paused, looking down at her with a soft, reassuring smile. "You've done well today," he said. "It's the first day of something new. You don't have to face it alone." Her lips trembled and she nodded, a silent acknowledgement of the trust she was beginning to place in him. She realized that this man, whom she had never met before, had become her lifeline, guiding her toward safety and hope when everything else seemed lost. He left her briefly to speak with the community staff, ensuring that arrangements were made for her continued safety. When he returned, they spent the rest of the afternoon discussing practical steps for the coming days, how to navigate the legal system if needed, where she could stay temporarily, and how she could gradually regain control over her life. He emphasized that every step would be her choice, empowering her to make decisions that were right for her at her own pace. As evening approached, they walked back toward the park where they had first rested. The young mother's steps were steadier now, less frantic, more deliberate. The fear that had clung to her like a shadow had not vanished, but it had been tempered by the knowledge that someone genuinely cared. Someone was willing to protect her, guide her, and walk beside her through the uncertainty ahead. They sat on the familiar bench again, watching as the city began to quiet down. Streetlights flickered on, casting a warm glow over the pavement. The elderly man pulled out a small notebook and pen from his coat pocket, offering it to her. "Write things down if it helps," he said. "Thoughts, plans, hopes. Sometimes seeing them on paper makes them feel real and possible." She hesitated but took the notebook, her fingers brushing against his briefly. The touch was grounding, a reminder that she was not alone, that connection and trust could be rebuilt. She began to jot down a few words, tentative at first, then with increasing confidence. Each line was a small step, a small act of reclaiming her voice, her agency, and her sense of self. The elderly man watched quietly, his heart swelling with a mix of pride and humility. He understood the significance of this moment, the power of presence and the impact of simply standing by someone when they are most vulnerable. He knew there would be more challenges ahead, But he also knew that today had shifted the trajectory of her life. In this shared space, they had forged the beginnings of a bond that would carry them both forward, grounded in trust, empathy, and the quiet, steady strength that comes from genuine care. As the sky darkened and the first stars appeared, they remained on the bench a little longer, talking, listening, sharing silences filled with understanding. The young mother felt a sense of peace she hadn't known in years, and the elderly man felt the quiet satisfaction of knowing that he had made a difference. The journey was just beginning, but for the first time, it seemed possible, hopeful, and full of promise. The following days were quiet at first, but beneath the calm surface, change was stirring. The young mother spent her mornings in the community center, sometimes resting, sometimes talking with the staff, sometimes simply sitting quietly, letting herself adjust to the reality that she was no longer alone in her struggle. The elderly man visited her regularly, each time bringing small gestures that spoke volumes. Fresh fruit, a warm drink, sometimes just his company and listening presence. Slowly, a routine began to form, giving structure and stability that had been missing for so long. The young mother began to open up more each day. She spoke about the isolation she had endured, the fear that had shaped her every move, and the quiet hope that had been almost completely buried under years of stress and uncertainty. Each word she spoke seemed to carry a weight, but also a release, as if simply telling someone, truly telling someone, was a step toward freedom. The elderly man listened carefully, offering advice only when asked, letting her find her own voice. He understood that empowerment came not from telling someone what to do, but from walking beside them as they discovered their own strength. He shared stories from his past, not to overshadow her experiences, but to illustrate that even in difficult circumstances, choices could be made, paths could be forged, and resilience could be nurtured. One afternoon, he suggested a walk in the nearby park. It was a place he had visited for decades, a refuge of green spaces, old trees, and quiet corners where one could think and breathe. They walked side by side, the young mother still holding tightly to her bag, though less out of fear now and more out of habit. The sound of leaves rustling in the wind, the occasional laughter of children playing, and the distant hum of the city created a background that was almost meditative. He spoke gently about trust, about how it was built gradually and carefully. "It takes time to let people in," he said, "and that's okay. You don't have to rush. Trust starts with small steps, small gestures, small openings, but every step counts." She nodded, absorbing his words, feeling the truth of them in a way that was both comforting and empowering. As they walked, they encountered other people in the park, a jogger with a friendly nod, a man walking his dog, an elderly couple sharing ice cream. Each interaction, however minor, seemed to reinforce a sense of normalcy, a glimpse of a world where kindness and civility still existed. The young mother began to relax, her posture easing, her steps more confident. For the first time in years, she felt the faint but undeniable sense that life could be different, that she could exist without constant fear. They stopped at a quiet bench under a large oak tree. The elderly man sat first, patting the spot beside him. "Sit, rest for a moment," he said. She did, hesitantly at first, then more fully as the comfort of his presence reassured her. They sat in silence for a few moments, the quiet only broken by birds singing and the distant chatter of children. Finally, she spoke, her voice low but steady. "I've been thinking about what I can do, how I can protect myself, but I don't know where to start." Her eyes met his, a mixture of hope and fear reflected in them. He smiled softly. "We start with what's right in front of us. You are safe here, and that is the foundation. From there, we can build one step at a time. You don't have to take huge leaps. Small steps, steady progress. That's how change lasts." They spent the rest of the afternoon discussing practical strategies, carefully planning ways to ensure her safety while also beginning to reclaim independence. They talked about moving to a safer place, seeking legal advice if needed, and building a support network of people she could trust. Each plan was discussed with care, emphasizing that she had control over her choices and that her voice mattered most. Over time, their conversations became lighter, more infused with humor and shared observations about the world around them. She began to laugh more freely, a sound that had been absent for so long. It was small at first, almost hesitant, but it grew, filling the spaces around them with warmth. He too felt lighter, reminded of the joy that comes from helping someone find hope in the midst of hardship. One evening, as the sun dipped low and painted the sky with shades of orange and pink, they sat together on the park bench, reflecting on the progress that had been made. She held her bag loosely now, her body relaxed, her eyes clear and attentive. He spoke softly, encouraging her to recognize her own strength, to see how far she had come despite the challenges she faced. "You've done more than survive," he said. "You've taken steps to reclaim your life, and that's extraordinary. Every choice you make now is yours, and each one builds on the last." She absorbed his words, feeling the truth of them settle in her heart. They stayed a while longer, watching the city lights flicker on, the quiet hum of evening settling over the park. The young mother felt a sense of empowerment she hadn't known in years, a fragile but growing belief that she could navigate the challenges ahead. The elderly man, in turn, felt the quiet satisfaction of witnessing transformation, of being present when it mattered most. As darkness fell, they walked back slowly side by side, the bond between them strengthened by trust, shared experiences, and a mutual understanding of resilience. The young mother knew that the road ahead would not be easy, but she also knew she was no longer alone. She had someone who would stand beside her, guide her, and support her through the journey towards safety, independence, and hope. That night, back at the community center, she wrote in the notebook the elderly man had given her. She documented her feelings, her fears, her small victories, and the plans for the days to come. Writing became a way to process the overwhelming emotions she carried and to remind herself of the progress she had made. The elderly man checked in later, reading what she had written if she allowed, offering encouragement, reassurance, and guidance where needed. Days turned into a week, and with each passing day, the young mother grew stronger, more confident, more in touch with herself. The elderly man remained a constant presence, neither overbearing nor distant, simply there, a steady anchor in her life. The sense of fear that had dominated her existence began to ebb, replaced by cautious optimism, curiosity, and a willingness to explore possibilities that had once seemed impossible. Through their shared time, he taught her subtle lessons in resilience and self-reliance, showing her that even the smallest actions, taking a walk alone, speaking up, trusting a new person, could create ripples that led to meaningful change. She absorbed these lessons with determination, often surprising herself with the courage she found within. By the end of part 3, the young mother had begun to see herself not just as a victim, but as a person capable of making decisions, taking steps, and finding her own strength. The elderly man had shown her that protection, guidance, and empathy could coexist with empowerment, and together, they had formed a bond that was quiet, steady, and transformative. The journey ahead remained uncertain, but for the first time in a long while it seemed possible to imagine a future filled with hope, safety, and self-determination. The days that followed marked a significant shift in the young mother's life. With the elderly man's steady support, she began to tackle challenges she had long avoided. Every morning she woke with a mixture of anticipation and cautious determination, ready to face a world that had once seemed hostile and unyielding. He had helped her set up a schedule that balanced safety, learning, and moments of personal reflection. Some mornings they walked quietly through the neighborhood, observing life around them. He taught her to notice the details, how the streets changed with the seasons, how small acts of kindness rippled through a community, and how people could coexist in harmony even when the world felt chaotic. One day, he encouraged her to visit a local library, a place filled with books and knowledge she had long been too afraid or distracted to explore. Inside, the air smelled faintly of paper and polish. The young mother wandered through the aisles slowly, her fingers brushing over spines, taking in the titles, the colors, the promise of stories and information. The elderly man stayed nearby, giving her space but remaining present, his quiet guidance providing reassurance without intrusion. They selected books together, some light and comforting, others more practical, offering guidance on legal rights, self-care, and ways to navigate life after leaving an abusive situation. Each choice she made was her own, yet he celebrated them as small victories, reinforcing her growing confidence. He emphasized that knowledge was power, and by learning and understanding her options, she could regain control over her life. Outside the library, they sat on a bench, sunlight filtering through the leaves above, and discussed what she had read. She shared her thoughts, her questions, and even her fears, He listened attentively, offering wisdom gently, helping her process information without pressure. Every conversation built her sense of agency and independence, showing her that she could think clearly, decide for herself, and navigate life with confidence. The elderly man also encouraged her to practice self-care, something she had neglected for far too long. They visited a small park where she could take deep breaths, stretch, and move without fear. He reminded her that caring for herself was not selfish but essential. Through gentle encouragement, she began to establish habits that nurtured both her mind and body, creating a foundation of resilience that could withstand the challenges ahead. In addition to these practical steps, he guided her in setting boundaries and understanding the importance of personal space. He taught her that it was acceptable to say no, to refuse harmful situations, and to prioritize her well-being. At first, it was difficult for her to believe that she had the right to assert herself. But with each supportive conversation, each small experience of choice and control, she grew more confident in asserting her own needs and protecting herself from harm. As weeks passed, the young mother faced moments of fear and uncertainty, but the elderly man helped her navigate them with calm reassurance. When she received threatening messages or reminders of past dangers, he was there to guide her in responding safely, using practical strategies to protect herself. These experiences, though daunting, became opportunities for her to practice courage and resilience, strengthening her resolve and reinforcing her growing sense of empowerment. They also worked on building a support network. The elderly man introduced her to trusted individuals within the community, people who could offer assistance, advice, and companionship. She began to attend small support groups, connecting with others who had faced similar struggles. At first, she felt anxious and out of place, but with his encouragement, she started to share her experiences, realizing that she was not alone and that others could relate to her journey. The friendships she formed became pillars of strength, providing both practical help and emotional reassurance. In addition to community support, they explored creative outlets. The elderly man encouraged her to write, draw, or engage in activities that allowed her to express herself freely. She discovered that art and writing became powerful tools to process emotions and regain a sense of identity that had been suppressed for years. Her confidence grew not only in her practical abilities but also in her ability to express herself and be heard. Throughout this period, the elderly man remained patient and attentive, never pushing too hard, never assuming he knew what was best. He understood that trust and empowerment required time and consistency. His presence was a steady anchor, a reminder that she could take life one step at a time, knowing that support was available whenever she needed it. One afternoon, they faced a significant challenge. The young mother had to confront the reality of moving to a new living arrangement for safety. The process was daunting, finding a place, arranging logistics, and dealing with the emotional weight of leaving behind familiar surroundings. She hesitated, fear and doubt gripping her, but the elderly man stayed beside her, breaking down each step into manageable pieces. Together, they created a plan that was safe, practical, and realistic. By the end of the day, she had taken the first steps toward a safer future, her sense of agency growing with every decision she made. Over time, these actions built momentum. Each accomplishment, no matter how small, reinforced her confidence and resilience. The young mother learned that she had the ability to face challenges, navigate uncertainty, and make choices that reflected her values and needs. The elderly man watched quietly, proud of her progress, knowing that she was becoming the architect of her own life. Evenings were often spent reflecting on the day's experiences. They discussed what had gone well, what had been difficult, and how she could continue to build her skills and confidence. The conversations were candid, filled with encouragement and gentle guidance. She began to recognize her growth, acknowledging her achievements and embracing the reality that she was capable of handling life's challenges. By the end of Part 4, the young mother had transformed from a state of fear and dependence to a position of cautious confidence and proactive resilience. She was learning to navigate the world safely, asserting her boundaries, building support networks, and reclaiming her voice. The elderly man had played a critical role, offering guidance, protection, and unwavering support, but always allowing her to lead the way. Their bond had deepened, grounded in trust, empathy, and the shared understanding that courage often begins with small, deliberate steps, taken one day at a time. The path ahead remained challenging, but she now had the tools, support, and inner strength to face it with determination and hope. The young mother had come a long way since the first day the elderly man had stepped in to protect her. The shadow of fear that had once defined every choice she made had begun to lift, replaced with a cautious but growing confidence. Life was not easy, and there were moments when doubt and worry crept in, but she was learning that she had the strength to face them, and that she did not have to do so alone. The first steps toward independence had been small but meaningful. She had moved into a safe space arranged with the help of the community center, a place where she could breathe, sleep without fear, and begin to rebuild her life. She decorated it with small touches, a plant here, a photo there, creating a space that reflected her personality and her newfound sense of ownership over her own life. Each decision, no matter how minor, reinforced her growing sense of agency. The elderly man continued to visit, offering guidance and companionship. They would talk about practical matters like budgeting, navigating public transportation, and maintaining safety. But they also talked about dreams, hopes, and the future. The young mother began to imagine possibilities she had long thought impossible. She considered furthering her education, finding a steady job, and creating a life where fear was no longer the constant companion it had been. One afternoon, they visited a nearby park, a place that had become a symbol of freedom and growth for her. As they walked among the trees and flowers, she spoke about her aspirations and the vision she had for herself. The elderly man listened, offering encouragement and insight but never imposing his own ideas. He reminded her that the journey was hers, that each choice she made shaped the life she desired. They spent hours planning small, achievable goals. She began applying for jobs, updating her resume, and preparing for interviews. He accompanied her to local offices and employment centers, helping her navigate unfamiliar processes and providing moral support. Each successful step, no matter how small, strengthened her confidence and belief in her own capabilities. In addition to practical skills, the young mother worked on her emotional resilience. She continued to attend support groups, sharing her story with others and learning from their experiences. She explored creative outlets, writing and drawing, to process her emotions and reflect on her journey. These activities became a source of healing, allowing her to release the weight of past trauma and embrace a sense of self-expression and identity. The elderly man encouraged her to reconnect with the world beyond her immediate safety concerns. They attended community events, visited local markets, and even participated in volunteer activities. Each experience, though simple, reinforced the idea that life could be lived fully and joyfully, even after hardship. She began to understand that recovery was not only about safety, but also about creating meaningful experiences, connections, and memories. One evening, as they sat on a bench watching the sunset, she reflected on how far she had come. The fear that had once been overwhelming now seemed distant, a shadow from another life. She looked at the elderly man, gratitude and admiration in her eyes. "I never thought I could feel like this again," she said softly. "Safe, free, hopeful, I can't thank you enough." He smiled, his eyes kind and steady. "You don't need to thank me. You did all the hard work yourself. I just walked beside you. The courage, the strength, the choices, they were always yours. Never forget that." Over time, she became more independent, handling challenges with confidence. She secured a job that offered stability, allowing her to contribute financially to her new life. She made friends, rebuilt trust, and discovered the joy of living without constant fear. Each day was a testament to her resilience, a celebration of the small victories that collectively transformed her life. The elderly man observed her growth with quiet pride. He knew that his role had been important, but it was her courage, determination, and willingness to embrace change that had made the difference. The bond between them had deepened, rooted in mutual respect, trust, and shared experiences. He found purpose and fulfillment in witnessing her transformation, knowing that he had helped guide someone toward a brighter future. Together, they reflected on the journey that had brought them here. From the moment he had intervened to protect her, through the days of cautious recovery and learning, to the point where she could walk confidently into a future of her own making, every step had been significant. They recognized the power of empathy, presence, and human connection in shaping lives and creating opportunities for growth and healing. In the months that followed, the young mother continued to thrive. She developed routines that balanced work, personal development, and social connection. She embraced self-care, nurtured her emotional well-being, and continued to pursue her goals with determination. The fear that had once defined her existence was replaced with resilience, hope, and the understanding that she could navigate life's challenges. The elderly man remained a mentor and friend, always ready to offer advice, support, or simply a listening ear. Their relationship, built on trust and shared experiences, became a source of strength for both. He found joy in her success and growth, and she found security and encouragement in his steady presence. Through this journey, the young mother learned the value of community, trust, and human connection. She discovered that courage could be nurtured, that recovery was a process, and that even the smallest acts of bravery could create profound change. The elderly man's intervention had been the catalyst, but her own determination and resilience had driven the transformation. By the end of Part 5, the young mother had truly reclaimed her life. She was independent, empowered, and hopeful, equipped with the skills, knowledge, and emotional strength to navigate the world safely and confidently. The elderly man had helped guide her path, but she had built the life she desired with her own hands. Their bond remained strong, a testament to the power of compassion, mentorship, and the profound impact one person can have on another. Life was no longer defined by fear, but by possibility, resilience, and the enduring belief that transformation is always possible when guided by empathy, courage, and human connection.